Okay, so we'll do a few things today. First thing I'm going to do is go over assignment 2. Okay, assignment 2 is going to be due in 2 parts. One part of it, small part's going to be due next week, and then you'll have 2 more weeks to do the rest of it. So you have 3 weeks. Okay, so I think we'll start there, and then I'll show you kind of where, we'll look at where we left off last week, which basically was, where did we leave off? I think was here. This is what we had done last week. And we'll look at kind of where we're going, and then you guys will also have a lab. So basically, last week we did the reading data part, reading a list of records, and today we'll look at how do we add a new record, then how do we delete, and how do we edit. Okay, and then your lab is basically a chance for you to practice doing create, read, update, and delete using ASP.NET and SQL Server. So let's look at your assignment, which is now posted on Blackboard. So the assignment's the biggest part of your grade. I'm giving you 3 weeks to do it, which should be plenty of time. Okay. So what I want you, the goal of this basically is to build a good sort of polished .NET application that when you're out job hunting in 4 months, something that you can show. Okay, here's what I can do with C#. If you're doing stuff in the Microsoft world, here's what I can do. So part 1, which is due next week, what you have to create, you don't have to do any coding for next week. I want a sitemap document and I want a database diagram. Okay, so I want to see a plan of what your application is going to look like for before class, so that's by next Thursday night. Okay, and then you have at the end of July, so you have 3 weeks to do this. Basically, I just want a copy of the full solution. I will also need a copy of your database because I'll need to run it locally. So I'll show you how, I think I did show you already, but I will walk you through again the process of how you take a copy of your database in a backup file. So not only do you need to zip your Visual Studio solution, I also need a backup of your database so that I can import that backup onto my SQL Server and then run your application. Okay. For this assignment, I'm going to give you the option. You can do it on your own, or you can work with one other person. And you can make 1 submission for 2 people, your choice. Okay, the requirements are not changing whether you work on your own or whether you're doing this with a partner. Okay? Everybody's project has to be different, and you cannot share code with anybody else unless that person is your partner and you're submitting the work together. Okay. I will ask, if you're working with a partner, I want both of you to still submit a copy of the code. You can submit the exact same thing to me. That just makes it easier for me to mark. So Tyson and John, if you guys are both working, if you're working together, if I only get one from you, John, then me marking Tyson's when Blackboard shows me a blank submission is a bit of a headache. So both just go ahead and post it for me, please, okay? And make sure that your project has both of your names. You can even put them in the footer so that I know if I get 2 projects the same, I know who's working with who. Okay? What are you building? Build whatever you like. Okay? So here are some suggestions. Build an application either that you might use for your own personal use. That would be one option. An even better option is build a .NET application that somebody might pay you for. Okay? If you're doing any freelance work, if you're already working on something, if you do it in .NET and you're getting paid for it, can you submit it to me for the assignment? Yes, you can. Okay, so if you're already working on something, great. Just make sure it meets the requirements of the assignment and you can submit it to me. Or if you have an idea of something you'd like to build, maybe you don't have a client right now, but maybe you have an idea for a site, you think you might be able to sell it later on or license it out, build a prototype for your assignment. Then you have something you can take outside of school and continue to develop and work on later on. Okay. So I've given you a few examples here of what students have built in the past, but really up to you. So build something that you might use or you think somebody else might want to use. Okay. So these are just examples. You're certainly willing you're certainly able to plan something else. These are just some suggestions. So for next week, what I want you to have done is you have to do 3 things. Figure out if you have a partner or if you're doing this on your own. Figure out what application you want to build and plan it out, okay? What is the database going to look like? What are the tables I'm going to need, and how do they relate together? What is the site architecture? So what pages are going to be in the site, and how would that look? Okay, so you're giving me a plan, so I'm already going to know before you start coding what it is I'm going to get from you in 2 more weeks down the road. Okay, so cheating should not be a problem because I expect I'm going to get, you know, anywhere between 15 and 30 different applications. So you'll have to create a brand new web project. You shouldn't be using your in-class solution. Okay. There'll obviously have to be input forms wherever you've got user inputs. We'll have to use the .NET validation controls to make sure we're getting good data. We've already done that. You know how to use the .NET validators. They're pretty simple. You should have some comments in your C# script. You'll have to do all 4 of create, read, update, and delete operations. I want to see all of those. Doesn't mean if you have 5 tables in your database, doesn't mean your application needs to do create, read, update, and delete on all of those. I just have to see them in there somewhere, right? We might have 1 main table and then 2 or 3 other tables that are just used to fill dropdowns as lookups. So you might only have read for 3 of the tables, and you might have create, update, and delete on 1 table. Whatever makes sense for your application. Your application also has to be secured. We will get to this either next week or the week after, okay? ASP.NET has a built-in library called ASP.NET Identity. It's basically a plugin. We plug it into our application. It will do most of the security things for us. Things like hashing passwords, login checking, etc. Okay, so Microsoft has a really good tutorial, which we'll basically walk through together in class, and then you'll need to implement that. So that's kind of the high level. So parts 1 and 2 you're going to give me by next Thursday night. Okay, so you don't have to write any code, although if you can get started, go ahead and get started, so much the better. So your site needs to have, I'd say, minimum 4 pages. Okay. So you'll use server controls for displaying data or capturing new data. You'll use proper validation. Your site needs a master page with a nav bar, and it needs some CSS. You can either create it yourself, you can use a framework like Bootstrap or Foundation. I don't care. It should just look clean. And it has to include create, read, update, and delete using Entity Framework. There needs to be a registration page and a login page. And everything else, whatever other pages you make, have to be private. Okay, so you can have a home page, like a home splash page if you want, that kind of describes what the application does, kind of like we've done here in class. So this is, right, it's okay to have a default page, and there should be register and login links somewhere. So obviously those 2 pages will be public, everything else is private. Okay, so to be able to create, read, update, or delete any of the data, you have to register and log in. And whenever you're accessing the database, you'll use Entity Framework. There is that drag and drop data connection control. You can't use that. Okay, that's not really acceptable in a production level application. So here's how we'll mark it. The first 4 marks I'll give you next week, or sorry, after next week. So I just need 2 documents. Just either 2 JPEGs, 2 PDFs is fine. Something in a portable format.
And it has to be in that, like that format where it's like a bunch of boxes connecting to each other?
Yes, right. It's called an ERD,
yeah.
And right here, an Entity Relationship Diagram. So you learned how to do those in Relational Database last term, so yeah, I want one of those.
You can make one of those in the Visual Studio.
I'm not sure if you can certainly make it in Management Studio, I'll show you.
Yeah.
In SQL Management Studio, there's a diagrams link, so you can go in and you can add your tables and make the relationships and save that, yeah, and then you can export it. So we can do that. So the bulk of your mark is for the create, read, update, and delete functionality, a couple marks for validation, 8 marks for the security implementation, making sure everything's private and that I can register, log in, and all the pages are secured. And then another mark each for master page CSS, commenting. Up to 2 bonus marks for any additional functionality that you put in. This is .NET functionality. This is not doing additional CSS, jQuery, or other things. Okay, so if there's other things in ASP.NET that you can get implemented and working beyond the scope of what we've covered in class, I'll give you up to 2 bonus marks for anything additional. Okay. Are there questions? Is there anything at all that you're not clear about? No? I did a spectacularly good job laying out the requirements here.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's come up with an idea, make sure it pertains to course material.
That's right. I mean, really the goal of this, well, if you can build something you might actually take out and have use for outside of class, that would be a bonus. That would be great if you do. But at minimum, I want you to have a working .NET application that you can show when you're out job hunting. Here's what I can do. I can build a working application using ASP.NET, Entity Framework, and SQL Server. Okay, that's the goal. Okay, so there is a submission link on Blackboard now. So here's part 1. So that's where for next week you just upload your database diagram and your sitemap, and then I'll create a second submission link for part 2. Okay? So try to get started early, give yourself lots of time so you can get help, and either if you need to come to office hours or send me email, that you have more time available.
You have office hours today, right?
I do have office hours today, yes. Okay, so that's there. All right, so let's just want to quickly run over. So this is where we were last week. So what we got working was the departments page, so we could query our database, and we were using Entity Framework in a pretty simple way to get the list of departments, which I seem to have duplicated. So here was the code that we wrote last week. On our ASPX page, we used this grid view control, and we just gave it a class. We said auto-generate columns was false, meaning we were going to manually put the columns in rather than letting ASP.NET automatically create all the columns. And we used this ASP bound field tag, which connected up the different columns in our database table to our grid. We also did a little formatting here so that our budget, rather than showing as a number, was formatted as currency. And we connected our ASP.NET application using Entity Framework, so we got this model. So this is similar to what you'll be doing for your database diagram in your assignment. Okay, so we were just working with the department table, and we were displaying these 3 values, the ID, the name, and the budget. So in our code, we said when our page loaded, we built this function called getDepartments, where we connected to our database. We ran this sort of shorthand query in this language syntax Microsoft calls LINQ. So this runs a select query on our departments table, and then we just connected that query result up to our grid. So we didn't have to loop through and build each column and each row one at a time. Quite efficient to do this. The other feature that we added once we had this working was we set these properties of our grid. Allow paging to true, and page size was 2. And we added this little event handler, so when the user clicked on one of these numbers, we could jump to the next page in the list. So we needed a couple of lines of code, which we added at the end. So when they changed the page number, we changed the page number on our grid and we repopulated it so we could show the next set of data. So this is kind of where we left off last week. So what we're going to have working today, if I go to my Monday class, so they have something similar. They have a little extra functionality, which I think we'll leave out for today. Actually, they don't. So here was the department name. We're going to want to be able to add a new department. So we'll want to build an input form. We already know how to build input forms, but what we haven't done is save new records to the database. So I'll want to be able to save a new record. This is what we're going to do first, add this functionality in. Then I should be able to go in and make changes and save them. And lastly, I should be able to delete. Okay. So this is I'll get to your question in one sec. This is the functionality we're going to get working today. We'll work with the departments table because we've already started this section. For your lab, basically what you're going to do is go ahead and redo this same functionality on your own. So you're going to build out the students page with the ability to add, edit, delete a student. So we'll go through, create, update, and delete together in class working with departments, and then you guys can go home and you can also add that same functionality to the student section. Okay, so we'll do one together. You'll have a chance to practice one on your own. Okay, Scott, you had a question?
The files from last week, they're on your GitHub?
Yep.
Like, how do you take out the file?
Okay, whoops. I will show you how to grab them from GitHub. So if you go to my GitHub page, which is github.com/ifotn, I think the link is on Blackboard directly.
Yeah.
So if you go into the repositories, everything in this class, it'll always be in this format, COMP2084 - so if you click on that, down at the bottom right, there's a download zip folder. So you can just download that as a zip. And then you can either work off of that. Again, if you have your own files, it's going to be better because your files will already have the database login. If you take mine, it has my credentials with my password wiped out, so you're going to have to redo those credentials every week. So this is why I would strongly encourage you to get the database SQL Server set up on your own computer and be running your own, using your own machine. Otherwise, you're going to have to keep setting your database up every week and changing the connection.
Well, I wasn't had it set up, so that's what I'm asking.
So I'm going to strongly urge for next week, bring your laptop to class, but before class, get SQL Server installed and get your database running on your local machine. Otherwise, you're going to be taking up time every class reconfiguring the same thing over and over again. Okay, and time is one resource that's relatively in demand. So if you download last week's solution, what I'm going to do is make a new solution I'm going to use last week's solution, I'm going to export it as a template, and then I'll make a lesson 9 solution, and I'll use my lesson 8 project as a template. So it will basically copy everything into a lesson 9 project. So I have last week's open, so I'm just going to click on File and Export Template. So I'll just keep the same name, COMP2084 Lesson 8, and click Finish.
Export template.
And now I'm going to make a new project, but I'm going to make this project rather than a blank one, I'm going to build it from my Lesson 8 template.
Where's the export?
It's under the File menu.
Oh, I can't access it.
So if I click File
Oh, project.
and Project,
Okay.
and I'm going to choose Visual C#. I'm not going to choose Web, just Visual C#. And now at the bottom of my list, here's my Lesson 8 template. So make a new project, but use Lesson 8 as the template. So I'll just call this one Lesson 9.
happens if your export template can't be selected?
Is your lesson 8 project open? You have to open the project. So I'm going to create a lesson 9 folder for today. Actually, I guess I don't need
It's
to.
open.
So I'll create my lesson 9 project here, and I'll use lesson 8 as my template. So that way my lesson 8 copy is left alone. I still have an individual copy of that, and I'll make a new project that's an exact duplicate.
So if we were to open and we go project solution for the, alright, okay.
So now I should be able to run my lesson 9 project. It'll just take a minute to add in a couple of support libraries we used. And it will be an exact copy of what we had last week. So it's got the departments page with our paging and our current date and time. Now, the other thing that you'll need if you're on the lab computer is your database gets wiped out each week. So you're going to have to set your database up again. I'll walk you through it this week, but I'm not going to continue to do this every week because you really need to have this running on your own computer and have it configured. So if you're using the lab machine today, I will walk you through it. You may want to write these steps down because once you get SQL Server installed on your own computer, you're going to need to set the database up there as well. Okay, I mean, you can watch all these steps on YouTube. I've went through it. It's on YouTube from last week. I'll do it a second time, but from now on, I'm going to expect you have a database running when you come to class. Okay. So open up SQL Server Management Studio. If you're on the lab computers, it's under Computer Studies. Microsoft SQL Server 2008 R2, and then SQL Server Management Studio. So you need to open that up. So if you're on your own machine and you had the database running last week, you're fine. You don't have to do anything. We're just going to keep working with that database I gave you last week. So you won't need to do this configuration again. So you're going to get to this window on the lab computer. Your server name is it's not case sensitive, localhost /. There's always somebody every week who puts in a / and then says, why am I getting an error? It's /ACPAC, and choose Windows Authentication and click the Connect button.
But if it's on your own, it can be any name that you made it.
Well, if it's on your own, the server name will be local, in brackets, and you have to change the authentication to SQL Server, and then you have to put in your SQL Server credentials.
Well, somehow mine, his name's Scott.
That's fine. If it says, that's fine. And click Remember and Connect. Okay. If you've already set it up on your own machine, you don't have to connect today because the database is already running. This is only if you don't have the database set up already on the computer you're working with. Okay. So this will connect you in the Object Explorer tab. You'll see Object Explorer down here. And it will say, if you're on the lab computer up at the top, it'll say localhost /ACPAC, or if you're on your own machine, it'll have the name of your server. It might be local, it might be your computer name. Server name's not too important. So then you'll expand the Databases tab. To create a new database, you select Databases, right-click, and choose New. You give your database a name. The easiest thing is call it COMP2084 with no spaces. I'll just call mine for today COMP2084A because I already have a COMP2084. And click the OK button down at the bottom. And this will create a blank database for you. So now I have a COMP2084A. I have no tables in it, it's blank. So the script to build and populate those 4 tables is in the Lesson 8 folder on Blackboard. So once you have this empty database created, you need to go to your course documents folder on Blackboard. And in Lesson 8, you'll see Contoso Database SQL script. Now, all these instructions for creating the database, I've already put them on Blackboard last week, so they're already here in writing for you. And now the video will be on YouTube twice. So that's about as much as I'm doing from now on. You're sort of on, you're on your own. I've given you 2 video walkthroughs and step-by-step instructions. That's all I got.
Do we need to change anything in our Visual Studio file for these actions?
If you named it, if you gave the database the same name as what you named it last week, no, you won't need to change anything. So right-click the Contoso DB SQL script, choose Save Link As, and save this file somewhere on your computer. I'll just save it to the Documents folder. Again, if your database is up and running, you don't need to go ahead and do this. So now I've downloaded the script file to my computer, but we have to open it up here and execute the script, which will create the 4 tables and insert a bunch of records into each one. So if you just select your COMP2084 database in your list and click on New Query at the top, you'll get the query window here.
Wait, where's the new query? Oh, I don't mind set up different. Okay, alright.
And then if you just click on Open File, or File and Open File, doesn't matter.
Should we add the new query when we click tables?
You may or you may not. You can also get New Query if you just right-click your database. You'll have New Query here.
Yeah.
It will also come up in that menu. So there's different ways to get it.
So whoa.
So then you've got to click File, Open, and find the script file you just downloaded from Blackboard. It's called contoso-scripts.sql, or it might have a 1 on the end of it. I think it's the same file. And click Open. That will open the script here in the query window. Make sure your database name here, there's a little drop down. Make sure this says COMP2084. It will default to the master database. So if that drop down says master, you need to change it and choose COMP2084 instead. We don't want to execute the script against the master database. We want to execute it in the COMP2084 database. And then click the Execute button. That will create your tables, and it will insert the data.
What code should we use for logging into the database? Like stuff that we just typed in, like your password for this database right here?
Sorry, I'm not sure I
I'm
understand.
trying to get what would be the code for like a password code for typing into this portion. 'Cause I know the other SQL.
When you open this program, the very first thing is you log in right there. Remember it gave you the login box?
Yes.
You don't need another login. You've already logged in.
Yes. But I'm just saying, like, we need to type in our password and application for this table to work.
We've already, well,
I was just wondering what it's, okay. Sorry, I was just wondering what the object table database thing meant, sir.
don't worry about that for now.
Okay. Sorry about that.
That's good. So just execute the script, and then you should have your database. So click the Execute button to run the script. You'll need to run it once. If you try and execute it more than once, you're going to get an error, because when it goes to create the tables a second time, it will say the tables already exist. So you should only need to run it once. So again, if you're on the lab machines today, please have this running before class next week. I'm not going to spend class time next week walking you through this again. So you're on your own to do this before next Friday on your own machine.
Okay. And so I guess we have it running now after that.
So now the database should be running.
I'm just having trouble getting the theme from last week into the
So in your project from last week, if you took my project off of Blackboard, then if you go to your Solution Explorer and open up the web.config file, on line 19, this is our database connection string. If you took my file from GitHub, it has my credentials in the web.config. So you'll need to change those. Okay. Again, the benefit of working locally is you don't have to do this every week. If you keep taking my files, you're going to have to change them every week. So if you scroll way over in this line, here are the things you have to change. Way over here it says data source local. So if you're on the lab computer where I've highlighted in blue, that has to be localhost /ACPAC. That's the name of the server you're connecting to. So you'll have to change that. And if you're on your own machine and your server name is not called local, but it's called, like Scott said, his server name is called Scott, so you'll have to change local to Scott. There's the server name. The initial catalog, that means the database name. It should be COMP2084 for everybody unless you named your database something else. You can leave the database name. If you're on localhost, you shouldn't have to do anything else. If you're, sorry, on the lab computer. You just change it. If you're on your own machine but you aren't set up from last week, your user ID would be SA, so that'll be the same as mine. But then it's got the password. So whatever password you've created when you installed SQL Server on your machine, you're going to have to replace my, I think I just had X's. At least I should have just had X's on mine. So you'll obviously have to replace those X's with your local administrator password. So once you've changed those credentials so that they match your SQL Server, the application should run.
So if we're on lab
So
computer,
if it is a like lab computer, so what would be the password for it?
You don't need it, because on the lab computers, it's using Windows authentication, so it just uses your Windows login. So you don't, if you're on the lab computer, you can, actually, let me think about this for a minute.
gives me an error if I try.
Yeah, if you're on the lab computer, we need a slightly different connection string. Okay, you know what? If you're on, I'm going to walk you through doing the connection again one more time, because it will be slightly different. The connection string, when you're not supplying the username and password's a little different. So if we just take them out of here. Actually, try this. So change the data source to localhost /ACPAC. You've probably done that already. It says initial catalog is COMP2084. Take out the user ID equals and password equals. So remove those and try putting in the words integrated security equals true. That might work for your Windows login, to use your Windows login.
But if
It's only if you're on a lab computer. If you're not on a lab computer, don't do that.
It's already there.
It's already there for yours?
Yeah.
Integrated. Let me see for a second. If you think you have your credentials in successfully, properly, click on the debug menu and start debugging, and this should launch your application in the browser.
start debugging?
Start without debugging.
Oh crap. It says start debugging.
It's fine. Just means you have to keep starting it every time. So when it loads, you should get this home page. And then to check your database connectivity, just click on the departments page, and we should get the grid of departments.
It was unhandled by user code. What's okay.
Is anybody able to see the list of data? Yes, yes. So this page should be running if your credentials are in web.config and you've set your database up properly. Question?
I have it worked when I got into the first page, but once I tried to get into the second page, I had entry exception was unhandled by user code.
I'll have to look at it when we have a break. So what we want to do, we have a departments page, so let's open up this page. There's our grid. We want to add a link on here that will take us to a new form so we can add or edit a new record. So in here, I've got an H1 tag on line 6 and my grid on line 8. I'm just going to put in an HTML link to, we'll call this page department detail. .aspx. We'll build this page and we'll just put it text in the link as add department. If your page doesn't load right now, we can just go to that URL directly. So then we're going to add a new page called department details. So to add a new page to the project, we'll just go to our Solution Explorer. I'll right-click my project and choose Add a New Item. We've done this before. We want a web form with a master page. We want it to use our theme, and we'll call this Department Details. And then Visual Studio will ask us what master page are we using. Well, we only have one, so we'll use our site.master. This will give us the header, footer, and CSS.
So we typed in a new one called department detail.
Yep.
Making a new page for it.
Yep. And it's a web form with a master page.
And
So we'll get this sort of blank template. It tells us that we're using the master page, so we don't get the HTML head tags, body tags, all that stuff lives on our master page.
okay. Can we just
I'll put in a page title, department details. And we'll build what's a pretty simple form. We basically need a couple labels, a couple text boxes, and a save button.
can you go back? Like you're going real back.
Well,
Sorry, I just
I mean, we have to get through it.
okay.
That's why it's recorded, so you can also go back and watch the lesson again at your own pace. So I'll just put on a heading here. We'll put on a label. So this is where having our model file we built last week is useful. If I want to look, we're going to add a new department. I can open up this diagram. It's like my database diagram inside of models. I'm going to open my EDMX. So we can actually have a look at the table. So we know exactly what the columns we're going to save to are called. So we'll want a text box for name, and we'll want a text box for budget. And we can even check for validation If I check the properties of name, because I don't remember how many characters, okay, so max length 50. So we'll add a max length 50 onto the name text box. And budget is a data type decimal, so we know we're going to validate for a number in there. So it's useful to keep this open when we're building our forms because it allows us to easily look at our table structure and make sure our forms match our requirements in the database. So I'll call my first box txt name. And maybe I'll just put a little message on here that says all fields are required. So we'll create an ASP text box. We'll give it an ID and our run at equals server. We know 50 characters is all that we can hold in the database, so we may as well use the max length property. So the user can't give us more than 50 characters. And we'll add the required attribute. So we'll just use HTML5 to validate it. Oh, actually, I'm going to add a little class in here, which will be called SM2, I think. Make my labels the same width so our form controls align. And we'll put on a second label, and we'll call our second text box txt budget. And I'll add here the type equals number attribute. Visual Studio won't like that very much, but it will work. We probably should also make sure the budget is not a negative number. So let's maybe add, in addition to using HTML5 to make sure that it's required and we get a numeric input, we also want to make sure that budget is not below 0. So we'll add an ASP range validator. We'll give it the run at equals server attribute. And we'll set the control to validate as our budget text box. So this validator is checking the text box called budget. Our CSS class can be label danger. That'll give us red background and white bold font for any message. So we'll set the minimum value to 0. The maximum value to something I'll set it as 7 nines. No department will have a budget above that. And the type should be a double, because it could be dollars and cents. If we make it integer, it will ignore the cents, so we'll make it double. It will include the decimal. And we'll set the error message to just say must be greater than 0.
For the validator, if you don't put maximum value, will anything happen?
It'll give you an error. It'll say a range validator must have a minimum and maximum. Now, it doesn't have to have this. This is a common gotcha with the range validators. If you leave this out, it will treat it like a string, which is not a problem in this case, but it would be a problem if I did this. Let's say I put in a maximum and I did it this way, right? If I leave out type, if I put in a value of 5, the validator will say it's not valid. Because it won't treat it as a number. It'll say 5 is greater than anything that starts with 4. It will treat it like a string. So that's a common gotcha. I've seen it in the other class when they were doing their assignments. Several people missed that. So they had a minimum of 0 and a maximum of like 100, and I'd put in value of 2, and the validator would say out of range because they did not include the that it was a numeric type. So it's treated like a string by default.
Did they do it on purpose? Like, why would they not make it, give it pop up an error so that you get, like,
I don't, because I don't know the answer to that. It's a fair question.
easy, right?
Agreed. So then we'll put in a submit button, which I will try to align under my text boxes. So we'll put in an ASP button, which I will call BTN save. It's a server control, so like all the others, we need to specify run at equal server. Our button can just say the word text. We'll give it a class of BTN primary. We'll make it a blue button with white text. And now we want Visual Studio to write a function for us that will fire when the user clicks the button. We've done this before. So if I type onClick equals, we want to create a new event. We want Visual Studio to write a click event where we can write the code to connect to the database and save the new department and then redirect to a new page. So I'll just choose create new event from this little pop-up menu. So again, all I did to generate that, I typed onClick equals, and Visual Studio gives me that little code prompt. So I'll add create new event and close my tag. Okay. So that's all the HTML we need. We shouldn't have to do anything else on this page. And we'll be able to use this page both first for adding and then later on for editing an existing department. So I'll just save all my files because when we add this onClick equals, it will write some code in the C#. It adds this function for us, which for the moment is blank. It doesn't save anything yet. We will have to write the code when the user clicks the button. So just to see our page now, if I build my solution, just click on build and build solution. And now if you go back to if your department's page is working, I realize it's not working for everybody. If it's working, just click your department's link and then click our new add department. And we should get this blank form up. So we'll have to do a little CSS tweak here. So now we get name and budget with our validation. If I put in, if your department's page is not working, you should just be able to browse directly to department-details and you'll get your form. So in either case, your form should load, even if your department details, even if your department's page is not connecting to your database. We should clean up. What did I do wrong here? I'll just put in a class in my two divs, and then they should align. I'll call this form-group. Add that class, and we shouldn't get that wonky alignment. I'm just going to add this into these two div tags. Yeah. That class cleans it up. It aligns and then also leaves a bit of space between them. I know it's not terribly efficient HTML. I'm repeating this, so I could probably make this cleaner. I could use Sass. That's just beyond what I can do. Just gonna let Bootstrap do the work for me. If that adds some HTML bloat to my application, it's the price I'm willing to pay. Okay, so our form setup, we have all the rules in place. It's 5 to 9, so what we'll do, we'll take a 10-minute break here. So when we come back, what we want to do is add code into our save. We want to use the entity framework to connect to our database. We want to create a new department and populate the name and budget and save that new department to the database. And then we want our application to redirect and take us back here, and we should be able to see our new department added to our list. So then we'll have add and create and read work, then we can do delete and update and get all that working in the next couple of hours. So we'll take 10 minutes. If your department page is not loading, I will come and have a look.
Can you go back to the department, ASPX?
This one?
Yes, thanks.
Oh, did you put in the extra div last one you did it?
Pardon? Where, Brandon?
The last div you made, it's like you made like container one call, yeah, one elements.
And then for group.
I put it in each individual div was a class of form group.
Okay.
The as detail, where you click in new file, right? Like make that page. Yeah, like you should go in the file.
Okay, so go to database. Okay, got it. Close that. Okay, so you got it right. Okay, so your database is here, which is good. You're going to set up and run it. You won't need to set it up yet. You're good there. Okay. So let's go back
To add the new ASPX page, you go in the file, add, and then you should go back. It's not working for me.
I have no idea why not.
So when you set it up here, when you logged in today, you didn't have to put in a password. Okay, let's close and reopen this. I want to see what prompt you get. Yeah, you don't need to save it. It's already, so your database will process. So let's close it and reopen. You don't have to save it. can actually compare it to the old one and we'll see what we were missing. Okay, put them all on one line. We hit enter before add. This was the old one. You scroll over to them, then you go to the name and further over. I can return.
Did you write down to make the other page go?
I'll bring it here, but there you go.
Here's how to do it.
Just keeping it warm for you.
Yeah.
Like I'm trying to make the new page. Yeah, the new page.
It must just be the brackets.
Oh, yeah, that's the problem.
If you want it.
That's the reason why I'm finished.
No idea.
I'm trying to add the new page and it won't let me.
I'll let you add a new page to your project. It's because, that's because when you see that red box,
Yeah.
that's why when you click debug and start when you click start debugging, you can't make changes. That's why when I use start debugging, because then you can make changes and it's running.
Oh, maybe that's what's the problem.
Yeah, that could have been the problem.
Alright. So now I can add,
Yeah, now you can go ahead and add it.
and I say new website.
Not a new website, a new web form with master page.
You're like, I'm tired of it.
Well, when you installed it, did you choose, it gives you two options when you install it. It says, do you want to use Windows authentication or SQL Server authentication? So whatever you pick when you installed it, that's what you have to pick here. So you probably pick, you just don't know. Not connected.
That's what we made the
You don't know me. Then you know.
You're
They have, you know whether you pick that, did you put in a password when you installed it or no?
Where is the web form of master page?
Right, so then you have to use SQL Server authentication.
To make a form, you go, to make a form, you go to add. C sharp.
Password, when you installed SQL Server.
Like, so I'm gonna make a form.
Password.
That's when you can actually like.
That's the password you have to use.
Oh.
That's why I said when you set it up, you have to make note of the password, because that's the password you're installing it with. If you don't remember it, I don't have it, right? It's your local machine. So just guess what you may have put in, you may have to guess what password you may have used.
Yeah, like it's like 60 or 70%.
All schools Where's the Facebook going? It says automatic.
Yeah, they work. It's like the same type of music.
I tried to
Yeah, they're there's like 10 as well.
So,
Like two,
I need to go through and get my.